All right, tonight I want to talk about stock market crash and why there's a depression in the United States. Hey, buddy, can you go lay down so I can do some work here? Okay, this will only take a little while. All right. Okay, good boy. You want some of this? Good boy. So, we're going to talk about why the stock market crashed, and we're going to talk about why there's a depression. Just because there's a stock market crash doesn't mean there had to be a depression. There are other economic indicators as early as 1926. Those were being ignored, and those are going to contribute again to the depression. Okay, the popular image we have is that the stock market crashed, and then the next day everybody was out selling apples and pencils on street corners. Okay, that's not true. I want you to think of the stock market crash and the depression are linked, but think of this as a slow leak. Okay, not a blowout, but a slow leak. All right, we won't actually bottom out economically until almost 3.5 years after the stock market crash. Okay, so again, slow leak. All right, and then for the next video, I'll talk about the international causes, because we're going to have to kill the banking system, and we're going to have to take a look at what's happening in Britain and Germany in particular after World War I in order to understand why the banking system collapsed in the United States. All right, so I will try to make this as painless as possible. Let me get this up here. All right. So, U.S. causes of stock market and ensuing depression. And again, as I kind of pointed out, this is a slow leak. All right. Again, we're not bottoming out until 1933. All right. Okay, now there's going to be, this is what we're going to talk about next time, why this happens right here. Okay. And then, so again, we don't even really until 32, 33 finally sort of bottom out. All right. So we'll talk about why the stock market crashed, and then those economic indicators that everyone ignored that caused the depression. Okay. Now, let's talk about the stock market. The popular image that everybody in the 1920s was buying stocks. That is false. At best, only about 1.5 million people owned any stocks at all. Excuse me for chewing. I would be snacking if we were meeting in an actual classroom, so I'm just trying to make sure you get the full experience. Only about 1.5 million people own stocks, and out of that, about half of them were speculators. Speculation, or as I call it in your study guide, speculation, I thought I had a different term for it. Speculation, gambling. Gambling on the stock market. And what you do if you're a speculator, you buy low, and when the price is high, you sell. It's very short term. Most people who buy stocks who aren't speculators buy them for the long term. They realize that stock prices go up, stock prices go down. And people, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, those generally go up, but they have periods where they sometimes come down a little. And they might stay steady for a while and go up, go down. All right. But with speculation, you're gambling. You're buying a stock on Monday, you're selling it on Friday and pocketing whatever profit you get. And again, about half of the 1.5 million owned people who own stocks were speculators. Now, what is the stock market doing in, well, it's beginning to bubble. And let me show you a picture of that bubble. Okay. This graph says 3 million. I disagree with that number. I still think it's 1.5. So whatever I said, I would never ask you a question about how many people exactly own stocks, but me and this picture clearly disagree. But you can see price is going up. Okay. Up. That is because of the bubble. Now, stock bubbles are just funny things in general. This is a stock bubble. Some of you may recall and you can have a bubble on almost anything. The most recent bubble we had was, of course, the housing bubble of 2007, 2008. And that involved what was called flipping houses. You bought a house, not to live in, not even to rent, but simply to sell again at a higher price. So you would buy a house, sell for a higher price. Okay. And so, you would buy a house and probably hold it for as long as it took for the paperwork to go through, and then you turn around and sell it. And what happened, amongst other many things, because there's a lot of illegal chicanery that went into the 2007, 2008 bubble. But what we began to see is that houses which at the beginning of the bubble were valued at $200,000, by the end of the bubble were selling for $700,000 to $800,000. Okay, that's a housing bubble. It only works if there's always a buyer. Okay, if you buy the house for $800,000 and then nobody wants to buy it, well, congratulations, you're the sucker. You're holding an $800,000 house that you can't get rid of. And if you amplify that by hundreds of thousands, millions of houses, you get an idea of how bad the crash was in 2007, 2008. We typically have stock bubbles. We had one in the 1890s. We had this one in 1929. We had one in 1987. And then we had the NASDAQ bubble of 2000. But again, anything that's sort of speculative, you can put a bubble on. Commodities will sometimes bubble. So basically crop goods. If you ever saw Trading Places, essentially the whole plot to that involves a bubble and an attempt to corner the market on orange juice. Probably the oddest stock bubble I've ever heard of was the Dutch tulip bubble in the 1700s, where people were essentially gambling on the tulip output in a particular year. 1700s, what else have these people got to do? But we're in a bubble here. Okay? Prices are going up, and they are not going up at a steady pace. They are going up and up and up. I'll give you some examples. For instance, U.S. Steel was going up 10 points a day. RCA, Westinghouse, we're seeing the same sort of things happen where their numbers, and when I say 10 points, 10, essentially $10 per day increase on a piece of stock. And we're generally seeing that all throughout this bubble. In addition to the speculators who were causing the bubble, there were a number of illegal, well, they're illegal today, insider trading bubbles. Now, this stuff is illegal today, but basically a group of people so you might get 5 or 6 people and they all decide we're all going to start buying company X's stock. So the price on that stock heats up. Other people will want to buy it, and that will drive the price up. Okay? So you're artificially inflating the price. And then at some point, you all sell it. If you can get the price up from $10 a share to $50 a share, at 50, you start selling. And when you dump that much stock onto the market at once, it drives the price down. And so all the suckers who are still holding are now holding it back at 10 instead of at 50. Okay. Believe it or not, that kind of activity was not illegal in the 1920s. It is extraordinarily illegal today, so don't do it. But at the time, it was not. Another problem causing the bubble, and this was not illegal, was buying stocks on margin. And this basically meant you were borrowing money to buy stocks. As you can see here. So this green amount is your initial investment. And then you borrow this from your broker to buy the stock. Now, if you sell at a profit, you subtract your original amount, you subtract what you owe to the broker, there's a profit. Now, there's clearly going to be interest rates borrowing the money, but let's keep this simple. But if that stock loses money, okay, if you bought it at 100 and sold it at 500, well, there's no profit and you're in the hole. Okay. Now, if that happens to one person, that's a personal tragedy. If that happens with tens of thousands of people with millions and millions of dollars, then you got yourself a stock market crash. So again, we have a bubble. Some of it's caused by illegal activity. Well, what would today be illegal activity? Some of it's caused by buying stocks on margin. Some of it's caused by just reckless speculation. Okay, but these numbers, this is a bubble. Okay, this bubble is beginning to inflate, particularly right here. This is going to keep on going. Now, here's the thing about bubbles that nobody knows while they're in the bubble. When you're in a bubble, it's really hard to figure out when the bubble is going to break. In retrospect, you can always see when the bubble broke, okay? But when you're in it, there's no way of telling. So it's essentially psychological. At some point, some trigger causes a few people to start selling, and then more people start selling, and then more people, and no one knows what the trigger is. It might be looking at farm price indexes. It might be looking at construction. If housing construction is falling off, that's generally a bad sign for the economy. And so someone who was in a bubble might decide housing construction is dropping off. It's time to get out. It's time to sell all my stock and get out. And that if a bunch of people come to the same conclusion, you might have a bubble starting to burst. It's always easier in retrospect to figure out where the mistakes were. But there's definitely a bubble. By 1928, so much stock is being sold that the stock ticker is running 2 hours late every day. Now today the stock ticker is all done with computers, and so you can keep a pretty good instant, you can know what your stock is selling at. In 1928 it was still all being done by hand. So a lot of time trying to figure out, am I broke? Am I not broke? Who the heck knows? Okay. In fact, Groucho Marx from the Marx Brothers spent a great deal of time in 1928 hanging out at his brokerage house, waiting for the stock market to finish so he would be able to find out if he was making money or losing money. All right. So a lot of money, a lot of stock being traded. Again, see how this number is going up. So that's definitely a problem. Okay, there's definitely a bubble there. When is the bubble going to burst? That's always the question. You don't want to get out early before the bubble bursts, because then you'll sell too soon. Okay, like my brother who bought a bunch of Tesla stock and then sold it, and then watched the price go up another $500-600 after he sold it. You don't want to be that guy. At some point, the bubble started bursting. October 24th, 1929. This is a Thursday. Prices fell. Okay. U.S. Steel fell, RCA, Westinghouse, Allied Chemical, what are called blue chip stocks, those fell off. Now, the market stabilized that day because a bunch of bankers, people like J.P. Morgan, the Rockefeller family, they came in, they bought a lot of the excess stock, and they stabilized prices. And on that Friday, prices actually went up. Okay. Saturday, prices fell. Monday, prices fell. Tuesday, what's called Black Tuesday, October 29th, the bubble burst. Okay. The market completely collapsed. People were trying to sell their stock for whatever they could get it. Okay. Our blue chip stocks like General Electric, Westinghouse were dropping 30 to 40 points that day. By the end of the day, okay, $10 billion in losses were reported. Okay. You will not see a stock market crash like that again until the NASDAQ collapsed in 2000. Now, again, this does not immediately plunge us into the Great Depression. Again, there's sort of a slow drop-off. Most make sure, okay. Just looking at different slides. The general thought was this was actually a good thing because this type of loss would shake all the speculators off. Okay, all the people who didn't know what they were doing. Okay, this would sort of get them out of the market, and the market would return to its normal self. The problem, man, there are so many ways to approach this, so I'm going to be careful. Let's go back and look at why. So this is the stock market crash. Why is there a depression? Let's go back and look at that now. Okay. Again, the signs that the economy was having problems are there as early as 1926. Okay. And again, it's always easier in retrospect to figure out where the problems were than to actually see them coming. Again, see the 2007-2008 housing crash. All right, let me start with just some general things. Coal mining fell off, 1926. Commodities prices falling. Basically, that's largely farm output. That can also include, basically fruits, vegetables, pork, steak, fish, those type of things. Those have been falling since 1926. We also have a problem with what else? Get these notes in order. Yeah, screw it, let's just go. So coal mining fell off, commodities prices falling off, construction falling off. Again, that's always a big one. When construction begins falling off, it's time to grab your gun and bring in the cat, all right, because things are about to get bad. So those are just some general ones. Let me get more specific here. Underconsumption / overproduction. These are, in general, two sides of the same coin. You can really use either phrase. This relates to what are called durable goods. Now, durable goods are goods that you typically buy once every 10 or so years. So cars, radios, refrigerators, ice boxes. Okay, this is the type of stuff people in the 1920s would consider durable goods. Most of us would consider these durable goods as well. Most people buy one refrigerator for 10 to 15 years. Most people buy a car for at least 5 years, maybe longer. Computers, probably. If you can get 6 or 7 years out of a computer, that probably falls into durable goods. But most people are not buying a brand new computer every year. Okay, much less a new car every year. So that's what we talk about when we talk about durable goods. Well, by 1926, we're starting to see market saturation of durable goods, meaning everyone who can buy these things has bought them, okay? I bought a car, beautiful 1924 Model T Ford that goes 25 miles an hour. I don't need another one. Well, if I manufacture radios and no one's buying radios, I'm going to have to lay some people off. Okay? So we start seeing unemployment starting to go up in 1926. It's unfortunate this particular chart only starts at 1929. But again, it had been going up since 1926. The 1920s had been pretty close to full employment as defined by the U.S. government. Now, problem number 2, which ties into problem number 1, overextension of personal credit. A lot of people had bought durable goods on credit, okay? Very few people today are going to walk into a car dealership with $20,000 to blow immediately. You might be able to drop $1,000 on a refrigerator or washer or dryer, or a new computer, but most people are going to buy those things with a little bit of credit. The problem with too much credit all throughout the 1920s, well, 2 problems. 1, savings drops. People aren't saving as much money because they have more bills to pay. That also leads to problem number 2, a drop in disposable income. Okay. Disposable income, for those of you who have not personally experienced this, is whatever money you have left over after all your bills have been paid. So once you've paid your rent, your groceries, your insurance, your credit card, whatever it is you're paying, on income, what you're paying on credit, and all your bills, even if it's $20, that's still disposable income. Okay? It's all the money left over after bills have been paid. That drops throughout the 1920s because people have bought a lot of stuff. Okay, and so their disposable income is dropping off. I got to pay for my car, I got to pay for my radio, my refrigerator, my icebox, my rent, my groceries. People are probably buying clothes on credit. All right, so disposable income dropping off. Well, if you lose your job, because again, unemployment is rising from 1926, you got bills that you can't pay, and you got no savings, and you got no disposable income. Now you're in trouble. Overextension of business credit. Okay. I borrowed a bunch of money so I could improve my radio factory. Radio sales drop off. I got to lay off workers. Now my workers can't pay their bills. They don't have savings. They don't have disposable income. Okay, and you can see the storm on the horizon that's heading our way. And then finally, the banks, because the banks have a special role in inflating the market. I put banks here. I thought I wrote banks. Oops, here we go. This money here for the stocks on margin, a lot of that money is coming from the banks. So banks loan money to the broker who loans money to you. Now, if you can't pay that money back to the broker can't pay the money back to the bank. And if the bank loses your money, by the way, Well, there's no FDIC. There's no bank insurance. If you have money in the bank and your bank goes out of business, you are what we professional historians refer to as boned, all right? You're not getting your money back. Now, today, we have FDIC insurance, and we have all that other fun stuff. But 1929, 1930, 1931, 32, when your bank closed, your money went bye-bye. So we have a nice, perfect storm here. People are losing their jobs. People don't have enough money to get through. And the banks are busy losing what money they do have in the stock market crash. Let's look at our bank failure chart here. Oh, whoops. Oh, see this? That's your bank going out of business, and hopefully you got your money out of that bank before it went out of business. Otherwise, again, boned in the ear. All right. Now, it's going to get really bad here, these bank failures. That's where we have to look at what's happening in France and Germany and Britain after World War I. That's something we're going to look at in lecture number 11, all right? But I'm just giving you a preview. So that is how we turn a stock market crash into a decade-long depression. The signs that the economy is in trouble are already apparent in 1926, 27, 28. Then we lose a bunch of our money in the banks, and that just makes everything worse. Yeah. Because once the banks begin to close off, then businesses can't borrow from anybody, and it just self-perpetuates. Okay, it just becomes a vicious cycle. Let's look at consumer spending as a result of this bugger. Oh, whoops. Okay. Unemployment. There that goes. All right. Again, look. Go. Consumer spending. And if people are buying less consumer goods, like my radios, then I gotta lay off more people at my radio factory. Those people can't pay their bills, and we create a self-perpetuating cycle. Okay, that's one of the reasons back in 2007, 2008, when the economy crashed, that we were encouraged to go shopping by President Bush. If we would start spending money, maybe we could jumpstart the economy. The problem was a lot of people didn't have any money to spend. Kind of the same thing we have back here in 1929. All right. Let me go ahead and kind of preview what happened with the banks. I'm going to pull in a question from later on in the study guide about the commercial paper market. So, commercial paper are short-term loans made by banks to businesses to cover day-to-day expenses. Okay. And it's one of the most boring parts of banking, but when commercial paper starts to dry up, again, your problems are coming. So let me give you an example of how commercial paper works. All right, we'll take a character, Sam the Butcher. Sam provides meat to 5 hotels and 10 restaurants. Okay. Sam has payroll to meet, but some of the hotels and restaurants have not paid their bills. So Sam gets a commercial paper loan to meet his payroll, then pays it back when he gets paid. Okay. Very simple. Okay. This happens every day, millions, and well, I don't know if it's happening every day right now. In 2019, in normal years, commercial paper market, tens of millions of dollars a day in these type of transactions. Well, if the bank fails, Sam cannot borrow, right? And if these people don't pay Sam, Sam can't pay payroll. So what begins to happen is banks fail. Okay. Commercial paper market tightens. Okay. The bankers are looking at unemployment figures, business failures, et cetera, et cetera. They decide not to loan to Sam. Sam lays people off. Okay. And if the hotels and restaurants can't pay Sam, then eventually Sam's business fails. Okay. Also, don't forget the people that Sam lays off now can't pay their bills, which is going to lead to more unemployment in other industries. And what began to happen as banks fail, and I'll come back and talk about bank runs later, as banks began to fail, the commercial paper market began to tighten. Okay, and we see this all throughout 1929, 30, 31, 32, but it became a real problem right here in the end of 1932, 1933. At that point, the commercial paper market pretty much collapsed in the United States, and all of the butchers and candlestick makers found themselves unable to keep their businesses going without the commercial paper market. Okay. So that's a little preview of what we're going to look at next time, but I did want to mention commercial paper because some of you might have been thinking, well, why can't these business owners just go down to the bank and get a loan? Well, again, the loan market is going to start tightening up as we start seeing more and more business failures right along here, and as we see more and more unemployment, and then more bank failures. But I'll come back to commercial paper next time. I do want to just bring it up here and kind of throw it out there and let you kind of wrap your head around it before we meet next time. Okay. So next time, so next time, there I am. We'll look at the international causes that contribute to the Depression. So we got to look at what's happening in Germany and France and Britain after World War I, because the banking collapses that we saw in that graph where it shoots up to 4,000, that's actually going to be caused by events that began to happen in Austria, of all places, and then will sort of spread out through Europe and then eventually the United States. All right, and I will make another video on that probably this week before we get to Monday. And then on Monday, we'll just have we'll pick up our regular lecture schedule. All right, so that is it for tonight, and I will see you in the next video. Good night.